He is one. He made promises to the ancestors. He will make promises and fulfill those promises here in this present generation, because He is our God, and our God is one. This is the essence of the meaning of the Shema. This has nothing to do with monotheism versus polytheism versus tritheism. No, this is about historical integrity of staying Israel's God as Israel keeps with the covenant and worships God. Nothing more and nothing less. In purpose and being, God is one and the same, though He's open and hidden to the future. He is becoming as well as being. The ultimate power is one as known in its fidelity and absolute reliability. A fidelity in the divine revelation to the world and in the divine self-relation as well. So this is the consistency and integrity of God Himself that the Shema is addressing. Now, Jansen finally shows how the scholarship on Mesopotamia took one of two directions, or they had one of two paradigms. One paradigm was the royal, kingly, godly ideology of the gods, where they were an aloof figure. And the other metaphor was the gods as parents of humankind. It was this parental metaphor that survived in Israel. And he says it was with the crisis of the fall of the southern kingdom of Israel, Judah basically, in 600 BC, the captivity of the Babylonians. He says it was in such a crisis surrounding the fall of the southern kingdom that was precisely within the horizon of the composition of Deuteronomy. It is in the face of such a test that the affirmation of Yahweh Echad has its significance in the context of the history of the religions of the ancient Near East. The theme was, the child is not forgotten. The theme was, God is still here for Israel. Even though the Babylonians came and wiped out the temple, they wiped out the people, they slaughtered them by the tens of thousands, they took them captive north up into Babylon, completely destroyed the kingdom of David. The theme of the Shema, that Yahweh is one, is that He has not forgotten the covenant of the fathers. So it's irrelevant what crisis faces Israel. The golden calf, Egypt, the fall of the southern kingdom of Judah. Israel, so long as she worships Yahweh and not the other gods, will be nurtured and taken care of. This is not a denial that the other gods exist. This is a denial of loyalty to those other gods. The Shema, hear, O Israel, Yahweh our God, Yahweh alone, is affirming the allegiance of the heart and the soul and the mind and the activities of Israel toward worshiping Yahweh. This is the theme of the Shema. He says the inner consistency of these connotations through time and all of its vicissitudes, this consistency which is of the essence of the divine faithfulness, and the Hebrew is emet ne'eman, the divine faithfulness to Israel, is what it is because of a deeper internal divine faithfulness. Not only is God one with Israel, because He covenanted thousands of years ago before with Israel's ancestors, and that covenant is still in effect, but God is one within Himself. He does not change. Once He makes His promise, He fulfills His promise. This is the integrity, the faithfulness of God, as it were. And because God is faithful, then He fully expects Israel to be faithful also. That's the theme of the Shema. This is the summation of the historical, theological context of Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 and 5. This faithfulness began in the divine council of the gods. That is why they had a council of the gods, to make the decrees to help Israel remain a nation. And the prophets through time, as Jeremiah is a beautiful example. Lehi in the Book of Mormon is another beautiful example. The prophets were allowed to visit this council, to hear the decrees of the gods, and to then take that back to Israel itself and say, this is what the gods are decreeing. You're being unfaithful. I mean, it's in Hosea, it's in Job, it's in Isaiah, it's in Jeremiah, it's in Amos, because of this principle of the Shema. It's what Jansen says, it is what I have been calling this fidelity of the divine relation to Israel is rooted in the divine self-relation that I have been calling integrity, and that the Shema calls echad, oneness of purpose, oneness of plan. Now, Jansen is not alone of the scholars who say this is the meaning of the Shema, not by any means. Norman Nagel, in his article, The Lord is One, this is in the journal Concordia for 2003, he has some very powerful discussion on what the Shema is not. And so I want to share some of this information with you. He says, here's the paraphrase. This might help us understand the paraphrase easier of the Shema. Please pay careful attention, Israel. The Lord, who revealed himself at Sinai through the Ten Commandments, is our God. He alone and no one else. Because this is so, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. That's Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 and 5. The emphasis here is on the all. Deuteronomy 6:4 should therefore not be read as a metaphysical statement about the nature of God. That is not the issue. That he is one and indivisible, that his essence excludes all attributes, or that only negative statements can be asserted about God. All of these issues arose in medieval Jewish philosophy, and they're the result of the meeting of biblical categories with those of Greek philosophy. That wasn't the concern of the Shema at all. Frequently, Deuteronomy 6 verse 4 was translated as, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Being thus translated, it is difficult to avoid interpreting the verse as attributing oneness to God. And for anyone trained in Greek philosophy, it's natural to relate that oneness to that of Parmenides and the Neoplatonic tradition. But the biblical text does not deal with such problems. It's Israel, its concern is the Jewish people's loyalty to the God of the covenant and the refusal to permit Israel to direct only part of its love to that God. That is the reason that the translation of Deuteronomy 6 verse 4 by the 1962 Jewish Publication Society edition of the Pentateuch is the correct one. And here is the translation. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. That is the translation. That is the concern. It has nothing to do with whether other gods exist. Of course they do. But the worship is for Yahweh alone. So Norman Nagel understood that. Jansen has understood that. Several biblical scholars have discussed this theme of the contextual idea of the Shema. So for critics who are arguing against this council of the gods, that the Shema is a monotheistic statement, and we LDS are taking the council of the gods out of context, and that we don't understand the Bible because the Shema refutes us, they're simply wrong. They are the ones who are not studying the biblical context. They are the ones who are not understanding the historical and theological ramifications of the way that Yahweh has dealt with Israel through his covenant to the ancestors throughout all time.